Hey, we're in Mark chapter 11 today, and I want to read you a story of Jesus as he comes into Jerusalem, and this will lead up to Holy Week. But here's what happens when he comes into the temple. And they came to Jerusalem, and he, Jesus, entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. He was teaching them and saying to them, "Is it not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." And the chief priests and the scribes heard it and were seeking a way to destroy him, for they feared him, because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And when the evening came, they went out of the city. So Jesus is coming into the temple. You see, what would happen back then is you did your sacrifices, you brought your gifts to God to the temple, which is a very good practice. We still practice this today in how we care for our church, how we care for narrative. That's offering. That's us giving to that mission of the church. But imagine this. When you showed up at church on Sunday, there was a table in the back with someone sitting there, and for you to give an offering, they were charging you 15% so you could convert that money to narrative bucks. Because at narrative, we just want to keep a straight system, so we use narrative bucks. Well, that's what was happening at the temple. You see, people would come from all over the countryside to come to the temple for high feast days and holidays. And they would give in that moment to the temple. And the temple, to make sure with all these varying currencies coming in, they had a unique temple currency. But the money changers, as they would exchange money, they were extorting the people. Now, this wouldn't be to say, if something happens, you're not going to look at someone and say, "Hey, this is your job, you're doing some of this." So we have to believe that these people weren't just taking a little bit to say, "Hey, I make my money," but they knew people were showing up to the temple. Think about it like this. When was the last time you went to a play or a movie or a sporting event? Right? They know you have to come to them, so you got to pay some money. How much does that drink, those chicken tenders, how much does all that cost? It's always exorbitant. I remember my dad used to have a cup that we gave him, a coffee mug, and it said, it was some huge amount of money, the $300 baseball game, and it had a dad and a son, and it labeled all the things they had bought at the baseball game. And while God says, "Hey, I want you to give, I want you to sacrifice," that's how he set it up. His anger and his frustration was that there was injustice. That people, when they changed their money, it wasn't just that they were allowing the money changers to make a living, but the money changers were gouging them. These people selling the animals for sacrifice were gouging them. And we see that in churches today even. We call it the prosperity gospel. If you give, you'll be blessed. There's a difference between offering, giving because God has blessed us, and Jesus walking into the temple and saying, "You've put a barrier in place. You are subjugating the people with these prices." So he turns over tables. He gets angry. And you know what? I give thanks that he did. To remind me that his house is a house of prayer and it's for me. That even in my offering, it's not about a gouged price. It's about saying, "No, the Lord gave to me, so I give back." Could you imagine walking into a place, and let's say the temple, you walk into the temple to give your sacrifice, and you're immediately grumbling because you've been overcharged for the pigeon that you're going to sacrifice? The Lord loves cheerful givers. He says that many times throughout scriptures. And here this barrier was being put in place to say, "Oh, you want to reach God? You want to sacrifice? You want your sins forgiven? You want to have your prayers answered? Well, you're going to have to pay a premium." That's not the way of Jesus. We're looking forward to seeing you this Sunday. Don't forget to start praying about who you're going to invite to Easter. It's great to be with you. Always remember, the Lord's house is a house of prayer.